Okay, good day, Dragon Slayers. I'm delighted and honored today to have back Charles Dennis, joined today by his wife, Eureka Vingsbo. Uh, they have a wonderful story to tell, and they're going to talk a bit about parenting, marriage, what makes for a successful marriage. My own metaphor is that marriage is a dance. So, how did your dance begin?
Ta-da!
Um, well, it was a very quick stepped dance. We essentially we had our first date on February 2nd, 2017. We moved in together on May 1st, 2017. And then we were married December 28th, 2017. So it was a very quick waltz, but we both liked waltz, and it was, yeah. And years later, it's still very good. But I think really what kind of connected us was we both like to chat, maybe me more than Charles, but we're good listeners, and he's especially is a good listener. But we came from similar backgrounds in dealing with parental alienation and dealing with ex-spouses who were difficult and complicated, to be polite.
How much did your previous spouses relate to the template of your own parents?
Actually, my ex-spouse, not at all. I was just, it's like I've been told by people who've been helping me get through this, is that my childhood was too good, so that I was just raised in a very naive way, and so I was gullible, naive, and I just assumed that people are honest, and that people don't lie and they do the right thing. So if I'm told that it's me, then I was like, I just worked harder at myself, not realizing that I'm being manipulated and, you know, led down the alley of doom.
That's interesting. I was married several times before I met Ulrika, and I remember my first wife was really did some really awful head jobs on me, and would tell me criticizing this and that, and I said, "How come no one ever told me this before?" And she said, "No one ever loved you enough."
Okay, so love is punishment.
Yeah, apparently.
Let me show you how much I love you by beating you.
Yeah, exactly,
Pretty
exactly.
much, yeah.
Buy a dog, lady. Don't get married.
Okay, but anyway, so this marriage began 7 years ago.
I have not scratched once this year. The famous itch. No.
Okay, all right. Well, it sounds like you guys have an ideal relationship. So, what makes for what are the ground rules for an ideal relationship?
Well, I actually think that the ground rule is that there isn't a ground rule, but I think a fundamental thing is the ability to listen, and the ability to compromise without having to, state that. For me, it's like, and nothing like a tit for tat. Well, if I did this for you, so now you should do something for me. Once you get into that territory, it really it's never gonna it doesn't work. So you have to be selfless. You have to like truly really want to do things, that you might not decide on your own, but you do it because your partner wants it. But for Charles and I, it's fairly easy because we like the same thing. But like a simple thing is, if I'm really tired and I don't feel like going to an event, and then he really does, I'm like, I get myself ready and I go, because it means a lot to him. So I think it's a good listener, and truly being selfless without expecting anything in return. I think it's people say, "Oh, I love you," and it's not about saying it; it's about doing it. It's like love is an act, and you do it, and you do it and not expect something in return. This kind of zero sum or tick for tat. It's like once you go down that road, it's like it's not going to work.
So, marriage for you is not transactional. Marriage is a team enterprise, and the marriage thrives. The marriage thrives when the team thrives.
Exactly, and it's it's that whole thing. Is like the two of you as a whole are better than each individual part. It's like it's synergy. Yeah, but you have to be willing participants, and I think that a lot of people want to, and I can say maybe probably women, but women want to get married, but they don't really want to be married. And then there's a big difference. It's like the parties and
No, elaborate on that, if you would.
um, well, I think it's because again, it's like it's the whole getting married part. Oh, you know, engagement, and you get a ring, and then there are parties, and there's all this attention, and da 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 da. That was never something that I was interested in because I don't like attention drawn to me, and it's about the life you create together. So, and I think. And I can also draw a little parallel to being raised in Sweden, that things are very different and they're not nearly as elaborate. Here it's just insane, the gifts and the amount of money that's being spent. But then after that, when the dance stops, it's like, now what? Oh, now it comes down to who pays what bill and who takes out the trash, everyday stuff. So it's working on that, and the everyday stuff is what it is, and that has to be fun, or that has to be what you want. And the longer you are together, and if children, well, the more that kind of becomes, you becomes the main goal. And so I believe that it's marriage is kind of presented in this very commercial and you know uh, gift giving and all this attention, and it's like one big party. So, and for us it wasn't, we just wanted to have we want the boring stuff. We just want to go to bed early and have a nice chat and be left alone and just focus on the real
Well,
stuff.
hold off on the nice chat. Uh, Prior to my meeting Ulrika, or the last 10 years of my previous marriage, there was no intimacy, there was no sex. Um, Ulrika had the same thing. She conceived two children, or she was the donor to her ex husband. And other than that, there was no intimacy. They didn't sleep together. He expected her basically to be the maid and the cook. And so when we got together, I mean, every night for the last 7 years has been our honeymoon.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it is wonderful. I mean, people say, geez, you look great. No kidding. I'm getting laid.
Tell me about how you view yourself in a culture that seems to devalue marriage. We have all sorts of stresses and pressures around us that tend to minimize traditional marriage and looks upon the kinds of engagement that you guys describe as being sacrificing yourselves when you're not sacrificing yourselves at all. You are looking at each other from the perspective of being a team. But you understand there are cultural pressures that undermine that message.
Well, we're both very old fashioned as far as romance, as far as what one expects from marriage. Also, we live on a 1 acre ranch at the north end of the San Fernando Valley, and that's our world. We have 3 horses, two Boston Terriers, my stepson every other week,
The bearded
the
dragon.
bearded dragon, who's Tabasco, who sits like a judge on a log, waiting for other wizards to come forward to be, whatever they've been charged with. And this one, oh yeah, and then there's the turtle who's gone missing but always turns up.
Yeah.
So we have all, we're self-sustaining here. I really don't want to leave the place. I mean, we're going to take Grayson, my stepson, to Santa Barbara next month for a day, and then we're off to New York in July because Amazon. There's going to be a billboard in Times Square for 2 days, all about my books. I'm thrilled to death with that. So, and we have a timeshare 1 week of the year in Cabo San Lucas. But other than that, I don't want to leave this place. And with this marvelous thing, where we see people now, we don't need to.
But also,
Well, it's like Shangri-La, isn't it? I mean, we're never going to grow old. I mean, whatever.
But when you leave Shangri-La, you can age rather dramatically.
Exactly, it's terrifying.
but I also think that and we started watching this show that about this con artist, and I was saying that, gosh, it's like it's amazing what can be done with technology, because you can impersonate people and you can pull something off a long time without meeting. And I mean, it's if you use technology in a responsible way, and AI in a responsible way, it can really open doors, but it's very dangerous. But I also think that the technology and in this kind of people are like, it's this instant gratification and it's now. And, I'm looking at my sons, how they grew up compared to me. And I think that, it's like, it's creating this, like, people get so, kids or youths are raised with this, there's so much information, so they get bored. And I think that it kind of creates this, this massive expectation on constant entertainment and, fulfilling desires and relationships, and especially marriage. I mean, what it comes down to is work. I mean, it's hard work, and it's discipline, and it's being respectful, and it's being honest.
I love the D word, discipline. Anything worth having usually compels the investment of discipline.
Right. And a lot of things, I mean, to me, success is about discipline. It really is. Yeah, this and doing the right thing. And I study a lot in my doctoral studies about, management and organizations, about, the good old profitability being the bottom line. And not so much anymore. It's about sustainability. And I think that can be applied to, to organizations, but communities, to countries, to families, to relationships. And sustainability is discipline, and discipline is being a good person and doing the right thing. I mean, doing the right thing can vary, but in terms of, do good unto others and that's sustainability. And without that, you can have profitability, but you can't have, coercive profitability and sustainability. So I think sustainability is like the key word, because that's longevity and it's growth. And yeah, it's that's what it's about. And you have to do it without using a formula. It has to come from within.
You see, Tom, this is why my marriage works. I don't need NPR. I don't need PBS. I have Ulrika and I listen.
So, one of the metaphors when I work with my patients and work with couples is the notion of the heroic quest. That I believe that to be extraordinarily successful, one needs to proceed on a heroic quest. Does your marriage have a heroic quest?
Well, this is interesting. When my daughter has not spoken to me in 10 years, since she was, no, it's 12 years this year. Sorry. She was 13 when I was alienated from her, and she'll be 25. She was 13. She'll be 25 this summer. When Ulrika's boys moved in with us, the older boy, we had to fight to have him go and see his father. He begged not to go back. And now she hasn't had him under our roof for 5 years, 6 years now.
Yeah, it was the yeah. 20,
So
yeah.
I'm writing a book called When We Lose Our Kids, which documents this alienation, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. So yes, if there's a quest here, if there's something to get the kids back, to get them back into our lives.
Is it because they don't see you as you see yourselves?
No, I mean, so the parental, so Ethne we don't know so much about because we have no contact with her. Carl, my older boy who's been alienated from us, I have occasional contact, and since he's a minor, I have to, keep working with my ex-husband, his father. And no, it has it. So it, well, it does have to do with how Carl sees us, but the facts
He's been alienated.
But the whole thing is that those views are not fact based, and they're not based on his own experiences. They're based on, years of brain manipulation and just down out lies from his biological father.
And he has the father has been identified by the court appointed assessor as a palpable covert alienator.
Yeah, it was shockingly clear to this, and she's a PhD, so highly educated, lots of experience, very
She's
well
a psychiatrist as well.
Yeah, and so she was stunned. I mean, she really hadn't seen anything quite so bad in her 20-year career. So it's interesting you said it's like perceptions, because perceptions, I mean, they're subjective and they're based on experiences, or so you would think. But this kind of very diabolic behavior that a parent goes through to separate a child from the other parent. I mean, it's the highest form of child abuse, and you have to be really evil to pull that off, as well as in our case. So poor Carr, he's in a bad spot.
Anytime the narrative is victim and persecutor, it's the rescuer that prevails and ultimately controls. And so if you've been cast in the role of persecutor and your children are alleged victims, the rescuers, that is, the other parent, is often the person that is in complete control. We see this in society right now. We're divided because our government insists that we divide ourselves into victims and persecutors. And that really is the antecedent of fascism.
Yep.
Wow, yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought of that. That's a very good analogy. Super scary.
Well, it is. And I think ultimately all you can hope for is that the child comes into an awareness where he or she begins to look at that narrative versus reality and say, wait, this doesn't compute.
Exactly, and in order to do that, they have to be in an environment that's not hostile. So for Carr, he's finishing his junior year in high school. So I'm hoping that when he's off to college, that being in a different environment, that he'll be able to kind of, because he's very smart. So it's like deep down, he knows it. I mean, I don't doubt that for a second. And there are a few moments where when I've been able to connect a little bit with him. But
But
yeah,
and the father has a history of physical abuse.
yeah. So there are many levels of abuse going on there. So, for Carr, what he's doing, he's doing what he has to do to have a safe environment. And then the safe environment he can accomplish if he completely shuts me out. So the best I can do is to leave him alone, but kind of know that he's there. So I text him a lot and I document a lot of things so that he can have that
Yeah,
as a lifeline.
she was in court a couple years ago, and the Judge Watkins, asked the father, "Does Carr lie?" He says, "Never." And she says, "I think he does. I think he does because he knows it pleases you to say bad things about the mother." So that was from the bench.
Yeah, it's a very typical formula. It's almost like there's a parental alienator school, because it's like they all do the same thing. It's just a different.
It's a bit ironic given your country of origin, but this is the Stockholm syndrome.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right. And I get that, and the thing is, it's like, so with Carr, I try to talk to him, but with my younger boy Grayson, he shares, difficult situations, with the other household, and I tell him that, I get it, and I was there, and similar things happened to me, and that's too, I think back, and I'm like, oh, how can that be? But I did the same thing to have a peaceful environment. You at some point you do whatever you can to not have, a physical or even an emotional situation. You just want drama free. But, after some point, that doesn't work either, because then there's resentment because they don't get their supply. So, but yeah.
So how much of the politics of envy is at work here? That is, you two seem to have an extraordinarily compatible, loving, reciprocal relationship. Uh, and as others are looking at that, they must be envious, and they might do all they can to undermine you and take you down from your perch.
Oh, absolutely, and that's something in my years of therapy now, because yes, there's an extraordinary amount of envy, and it took me a while to really realize that, because I couldn't understand. Well, he wasn't interested, and he didn't want to have the family he had, and he did everything he could to put me down and travel and not be home, and and I only know a little bit of all the things that he did. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more. So then I was like, I thought, actually, I mean, I wanted to leave for me, but I'm like, I thought I did the best thing for the entire family, and especially him. I'm like, he clearly isn't interested. But oh boy, that made, yeah. So
The minute I turned up,
yeah.
suddenly he was interested.
Well, he wasn't interested, but he didn't want it, but no one else should want it either. And so yeah, but and I think that concept makes the envious even more, because it's conflicting. And this person is clearly narcissistic personality disorder, possibly sociopath. So it's the whole conflicting and needing the supply and the insecurity that really is at the bottom of everything. But absolutely, and I would say jealousy, but resentment, that's really the better description. That there's an extraordinary high level of just resentment and like hatred.
He had me put in jail on a citizen's arrest. I was released after a few hours, and
Tell us about that. How did that occur?
we were living in the first rental house in Tarzana, and it was the day of the exchange. He brought car back, parked in our neighbor's driveway next to our house, and Ulrika said, "I don't want to deal with this. Can you go outside and get car?" So I did, and he was still doing whatever he does with car, in the vehicle. And I said, "Car, please come on." And he said, "Just a few more minutes." And I said, "No, it's time for him to go." And then he started taunting me about uh, a young woman who was supposedly my daughter who wasn't. And I said, "She's not my daughter." And then he got evil and was going on about Ethne, my daughter, who I'm alienated from. And he said, "How's Ethne?" And I could show you the pharmacological list of the drugs poor Ethne was on. And he had his phone out by this time, and he had it in my face and
recording, yeah, without that's his MO.
Because of my own history with my brother years ago, it just pushed a button. I grabbed the phone. He went, "That's assault." And I went inside and called 911, and the police arrived. By this time, I'd taken the phone back outside and thrown it on the lawn. And then the police came and they said, just sit here, Mr. Dennis. We'll take care of this." And they were gone for 5 minutes, and they came back and they said, "We're sorry. He insists on a citizen's arrest. There's nothing we can do." And I was handcuffed and taken to jail. And this was clearly a setup on his part, because he does nothing. He doesn't work. He has money from his family, and he sits there and just dreams up diabolical schemes all day.
It's sick. It's very
and I got in touch with his first wife because he had told Ulrika she was trailer park trash and this and that. And I found her in Denver, and she was a dear, sweet woman. And I put them on the phone together. And Ulrika said, "It's like we have the same diary." I mean, everything that happened to her happened to the previous wife. He's told the boys never to get married.
How did she survive the incarceration?
Oh, it was Friday night, which was kind of scary because if I was, if they didn't let me out, I'd be there all weekend.
Yeah, and that was planned too. That because typically, if you get brought in on a Friday night, the earliest you can come out is Monday morning. But this wasn't a police arrest. The police didn't want to do it. But by grabbing that phone, it's considered assault, even though he never touched him, and even though at the time we could have, argued that we didn't authorize being filmed. And that's a big thing in California, that you need authorization, but they had to do it. But because of that, they pretty much just checked the box. So they booked him in, but I phoned them and they actually spoke to me on the phone, which is very unusual too. And they're like, "Don't worry, we just need to wait. There was something, they had to do one more thing, and he'll be out by 9:00.
And the other thing he did subsequently was he edited the video so that any mention of my daughter was not heard. And all it looks like is I'm suddenly, when I'm reaching out for the phone, but it looks like this. And so he then distributed this film, this doctored film, to look like it actually did assault him.
He published it. So there are a lot of things that he did that, were kind of...
But curiously, when they did that assessment I told you about, where he was identified as the alienator, the original video was restored because he knew it would not survive. I had 3 different professional editors look at it and say it's clearly been edited.
But
he doesn't think these things through past the minute of...
and it's this constant, first of all, to spend your entire life coming up with these things, but then this constant pushing the pushing the boundaries. But so unfortunately, he is an attorney at law. He took his bar in Colorado. He's never practiced, but unfortunately, he does have the law degree, and he spends a lot of time researching the law and knowing exactly how you can push it. But one of these days he's gonna go too far, and like this video and the unauthorized video he kind of missed, and all the videos that he took of me, I clearly say, don't video me, I don't want to be videoed, leave me alone. And he's like really really pushing me, thinking that that's going to demonstrate that I'm the crazy one. But
By the way, isn't that considered an assault?
yes, it is. It is. But at the time, I didn't know. But so I'm building all these things because absolutely, I have this where I'm saying,
there may be no statute of limitations on those things. So there's a whole other.
So, but it's hard. It's like one of my favorite expressions is that it's really really hard to win an argument against an intelligent person, but it's impossible with someone who isn't, because they'll drag you down to their level and then beat you with their experience. And it's the same thing with my ex. It's that he spent his whole entire life being like this, doing these things. So I can't even, I can't dream these things up. It's like every time something dramatic and crazy happens, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like always blindsided, because I'm like, how does one person come up with these diabolical things?
When Grayson was 4 and first living with us, he had a glass of water and it spilled accidentally on the dining table and he started shaking. And I thought, Grayson, it's okay. And then finally I took my glass of water and spilled it on the table. I said, see, there's no big deal. But it was because of what the life is like at his father's house, where nothing can be spilled. He's an obsessive. He's a very disturbed human being. And I feel the victims here are the children. He's already succeeded in alienating one of them. And we're doing our best to keep Grayson, in the week he's not with us, to keep his head above water.
And unfortunately, parental alienation is not a crime. And in California, I don't know if there's a state where it is, but it's not considered a crime, which is crazy. So even though he's been established a parental alienator, there really isn't a whole lot you can do, because it's not a crime. And the courts, the family courts, they're like, well, now, and for Carr, he's 16 and a half years old. He's like, he's too old. There's nothing to do. He doesn't want to go. It'll be too traumatic for him to change. So essentially, not only do these parental alienators not get punished, they actually get rewarded, because now they get what they want. So it's really sick.
But what you're describing really is, in a functioning divorce where couples say, okay, we're not really fit for each other, but we want to do the best we can for our kids, you communicate. And you communicate on behalf of the children. On the other hand, if you're dealing with somebody who's a narcissistic and has motivation other than being child-centered, what you have is the child being delegated the responsibility of conveying the hostility. So the child is a messenger in that. And that's actually far more common in adversarial divorces than is often represented. I see it every day virtually. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Again, the books that you have written are, go ahead. Well, I hope we'll have an opportunity again. It's been just a delight to meet you. The partnerships, and those of you who wish to support this enterprise, for me, pick up a copy of Dragon Slaying, a guidebook for heroic self-transformation. Well, once again, thank you for sharing your story. And Charles and Eureka, I look forward to further dialogues. You're a wonderful couple. I will expect next time to see you that you will also be color coordinated, because not only do we have the wisdom from you two, but we've got a fashion show. So it sounds quite wonderful. Okay, be well.